Hey there everybody. So thought I'd put up another video on a cutting pattern that I've come up with and have been working out of. This is a fun one because you can make it pretty complicated. Works best with a one-handed sword, any type of work. I don't really have a name for this pattern, but the idea is that I'm going to do just two Oberhau, one from each side, while keeping the sword lined up with my core. So what I mean by that is that, for example, if I am going to cut from my dominant side, I want to make sure that my step brings it so that I am lined up with my core. Now, with a one-handed sword, you can get away with being against your core, but in general, you're going to be stronger if it's lined up like so, or if I cut from the other side, if it's lined up like so. However, with the one-handed sword, this leads to a certain preparation that I don't really like, because it's a pretty weak preparation, which is, if I cut from my right to my left, I go, well, I'm currently holding the sword in my left hand, I should point out, so I'm currently being your mirror image if you're following along. But if I cut from my dominant side, boom, to then from my non-dominant side, it rolls quite naturally. I go forehand, backhand. However, if I do it the other way around, backhand, now the most natural way to cut is to bring this up by my shoulder and then forehand again. Now, is that cut in preparation strong? Yes, absolutely. No real issues with it. But I find it leaves me a little bit more open than I would like. Especially with the one-handed sword. With the two-handed sword, it's less so, because here I've got this power to go. With the one-handed sword, you can still get it, but there is that opening where you're going to be kind of weak. So, I wanted to come up with a cutting pattern that allows me to do both from one side. So here's how this works. The idea here is going to be that I'm going to cut down and use the same wrist rolling action to then cut down from my dominant side. So here's how to do it. Once again, I am doing this left-handed, so I'm your mirror image. Extend your sword out so that your hand is at a 45-degree angle with your core. Okay? I'm currently standing with my left foot forward, your guys is right. And I am going to bring the tip down, turn the hand over, bring it up to the level of my shoulder, and then I can cut down. That's coming from my non-dominant side. Now to prepare the second cut, what you'd be tempted to do would be to roll it the other way. Instead, roll it back the same way, and then bring it very sheerly by your head again as I cut from my other shoulder. So, what this looks like from the side, so this is boom from my non-dominant side. I prepare back the same way, and then I cut down kind of across myself. Boom. If you do these together, you can execute the same cut with the same, two different cuts with the same preparation. This is a particularly useful skill to be able to do because that allows you to do rolling cuts, which is excellent if you can get them to fake for that one, then follow up with another, etc. It's the same kind of mechanic that you would do if you wanted to cut out of your non-dominant side from a guard. So for example, here I'm in Vom Tag. I can't speak today. It's all the turkey. But anyway, I'm in Vom Tag, and I want to cut from, in this case, my right side. So what I'm going to do is, rather than switch into this guard, I am going to just shear by my head and bring this down from my other shoulder. It is a shortcut. It's not going to have as much, literally, it is a shortcut, so it's not going to have as much range as it normally would, but it's a way to launch that quick non-dominant side Oberhau without giving away your intent. So, that's where we're kind of working off here. Now it's time for the footwork, which is where things get a little bit more complicated. Let me just adjust this downward. Okay, cool. So, the footwork we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to line our core up with our feet. So, when I finish the cut from my dominant side, I should be dominant foot forward. My cut should be coming down at a 45-degree angle. When I finish from my non-dominant side, I should be my other foot forward, and the cut is coming down from a 45-degree angle going that way. Okay? Now all of these are going to be half cuts, which will terminate in Langenort on either side. So, in this case I'm going to start off with my dominant side forward, so that means I'm going to start off with a cut from my non-dominant side. I prepare, and I'm going to step up as I deliver that cut. Now I'm going to prepare the same direction and cut as I step back from my dominant side. So, forward, back. that's nice and fun, but let's do it the other way so that the other foot is the one that's moving, because right now, all I'm doing is I'm just kind of shifting this back into place. So I get that pattern going again, forward, back, forward, back. Now, when I want to change sides while still doing the pattern, I just pick one of these opportunities and I move my other foot. So, forward, forward. Now I'm doing the same thing, but with my left foot. In your case, it'd be your right foot if you're mirroring me. Unless you're left-handed. And if I want to go back to what I was doing before, back, back. So you're just alternating sides of cut, and you're just stepping forward and back with whichever foot. Now, that's the first part of it. Decently challenging, gives the forearm a nice workout, and I don't recommend doing this for too long. Just a little bit of practice till you start feeling it, then set it down, chill out, then come back to it. But if I want to make this a bit more complicated, besides just the shifting direction, I can also add in a thrust after each cut. So you notice I'm doing half cuts, not full cuts. So if I want to add in a thrust, what's going to happen is I'll need to use, there's two different styles of mechanic for this. I can either do a hip turn with my thrust, or I will do a small, let me back up so you can see it. I will do a small little advancing step with just my front foot to deliver the thrust. So I'll show you the hip turn first. In this case, I'm going to, once again, start off same side. I step forward, boom. I am going to extend my hip as I bring that tip out, okay, making sure that I'm guarded. I'm going to step back, and for this one, I'm going to once again extend this hip. Forward, hip, back, hip. Forward, hip, back, hip, okay? Now I am still extending my arm, so I'm not just using the hip turn, I am leaning into it ever so slightly. Now, where this is particularly useful is if you're super close to someone and you have that bind and you don't want to step any closer for whatever reason, you just add that little bit of extra hip turn into it, you keep that line closed off, and you can deliver your thrust. Now, I find that the one on the non-dominant side, where it's lined up with this hip, feels much more natural than this one, but this one is still certainly valid. It's especially good for launching little short edge cuts behind their blade. But the other style of footwork is where I do a small step with each attack. So I will turn sideways for this one, but once again I'm starting off like so. I step forward, then I'm going to take a small step with that front foot, return, step back, small step with arm extension, forward, small step, backward, small step. So you see how this can get a lot more complicated very quickly. And you can also start blending them. So maybe, for example, I do the small step forward on my dominant side, and I do the hip turn on my non-dominant side, or vice versa, or what have you. So let me just show off a little bit of that, and then we'll be done. So I will start off with a small advancing step on both sides. Boom, 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 boom. Now, if I wanted to, let's say, switch which foot is moving, I don't do a thrust, step forward again, then launch into the thrust, and I can use that same foot again. Here is doing it with a hip turn on my, in this case, right side, and a small advancing step on my left side. So I start and open, and I'm going to do this stepping back for sake of variety. So boom, hip turn, boom, advancing step, boom, hip turn, boom, advancing step. And you can switch it up, vary it up, what have you. The main things to make sure as you're doing this is, number one, don't do it for too long. Okay? This will give you a really good balanced amount of footwork and get you used to voiding your foot as you cut or things along those lines, or launching a thrust from close in. But you don't want to do this for too long in one stretch, because it's a monotonous pattern, which makes it pretty easy to just do and do and do. But the longer you do it, the sloppier it's going to get. So get it for a little bit, feel that burn, then set the sword down, come back, then start adding in those thrusts, feel the burn, set the sword down, then come back and start playing with the footwork. You can also just practice the footwork by itself, that's all fine. But You can also do this with a two-handed sword, I should point out. So in this case, I'm just using an arming sword, but I could do this with a basket hilt. I could do this with a rapier, that really sucks. Or I can even do it with a longsword, in which case I still do the preparations on the same side. So you notice that it's preparing always on my right side, but I am delivering two different overhows. And it doesn't matter if I step forward or back. And you can still have that same hip turn thrust or little step thrust. But make sure when you're cutting as well that I am cutting out, then extending. I'm not cutting short, then extending. Right? I'm making sure to cut to extension and then go a little bit further or a little bit further. Okay? Keep an eye on the angle of your cut, especially when you're doing this guy. It's very easy to end up doing more of a Scheitelhau, which is fine, but not really what we're emphasizing. So, hopefully someone gets some use out of that pattern. It's what I've been doing. It's a lot of fun. Otherwise, though, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your turkey day.